Happy to see so many people here to hear such a desultory conversation. There's actually some good things to talk about, but quite a bit that we would rather have a different way. Before I really get into it, let me explain something about myself and when I speak on things like this. I've grown extremely tired of people who present themselves as analysts and just tell it like it is, folks, and about halfway through you realize they have an agenda that they're pushing. So I don't do that. So let me tell you about my background. For a long time I was a garden variety card-carrying Republican, but the excesses of the two Bush terms and the Republican Congress during the first 6 years just sort of wore me out, to tell you the truth. And so I liberated myself to become a business-friendly, conservative / libertarian type. And I normally vote for the Republicans because they're the best option, but that's really where I am. And I'm going to present a lot of facts about this election and also some opinions, obviously. I just wanted you all to know that. Okay, the November 6th election. An exit poll said that the economy, I'll be talking about a lot of exit polls, economy, the most important issue, economy and jobs. So what do we know for sure over the years? Well, we know that if you have a really poor economy where growth is declining and it's below 2%, and you have a fantastic increase in the national debt, 40% of every dollar spent has to be borrowed. I could go on, but you get the picture. Of course, the incumbent always loses in a landslide. We also know that when 2/3 to 3/4 of people that are polled say that the country's on the wrong track, when people, when the polls show that the voters want to change, we know that late deciders always go for the challenger. I mean, that's conventional wisdom. We know that when unemployment is over 7%, the incumbent always loses. Therefore, and of course at election day it was, I believe, 7.9%. It had bobbed back up from 7.8. So we know all these things are true, right? Wrong. So what happened? Because those things had pretty much always been true before. And that's the big question. The obvious question is, how did something like this happen? And I'm talking about the presidential race. I'll talk about some of the other stuff later on. Well, it's complicated. My opinion is, and I'm going to go through them, there are lots of reasons that all coalesced, and every one of them are bad for conservatives and the Republican Party in particular. Let's start with this one. Exit polls showed, and this is an old theory of the last 10 or 15 years, of a lot of liberals in the media and elsewhere have been writing that the GOP is about to be overtaken by a demographic shift, that more and more minorities and less white people means more and more likely that the GOP is going to end up being a permanent minority in the future. And so look at this statistic. I think there's something to that. In fact, I think there's a lot to that theory right now. In 1980, when Reagan won, 88% of the voters were white. In 2012, that percent was 72%. That's a loss of 16%. This isn't a racial statement. I'm just saying that white people tend to be more conservative than the others, and therefore are more likely to vote Republican. So if Mitt Romney had been running this year with 88% white voters, I think he'd probably won in a landslide. So there's a big demographic shift. Here's another exit poll. Minorities in 2008 were 26% of the electorate. And this year, 4 years later, 28%. Going up. Part of that's the great job done by the Obama campaign, and I'll get to that shortly, because they did a great thing. Blacks, Hispanics, young people, 18 to 29, women, all up over about 2% over 2008. So these are some demographics that are changing. Another demographic that's changed is that almost, or maybe we're there now, 50% of people don't pay income tax. And so for them, what does a bad economy mean? Probably not much. You know, they're getting things from the more productive in society. So it's just another demographic shift that doesn't augur well for the Republican Party. That's number one. Then we have the Obama campaign. Another driving reason why this was such a big loss this year. And I just have to say, there were two really fantastic campaigns this year, in my opinion. The Obama campaign was one of them, and I'll explain why in a second. The other one was the Claire McCaskill campaign, which was smart enough to select her own opponent, even though she'd been left for dead up before that. Anyway, let's look back at the Obama campaign. Remember, this is the same campaign that beat the mighty Clinton organization back in '08. That ain't nothing. These people were good back then. Number two, in my opinion, one of the key drivers of the Obama win were the attack ads on Romney back in May, June, and July. They attacked his character, his business ethics, his wealth. I couldn't remember it all, so I got what some guy said in a post. They called him a tax-avoiding cheat who probably never paid taxes for a decade, a near felon who lied on a federal form, and a veritable killer who in piratical fashion destroyed a cancer victim's chance of getting medical attention. These are all lies, of course. A warmonger, out to destroy Detroit, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I've always thought that in politics, if you let somebody else define you, and you don't define yourself, you are in big trouble. And during those 3 months, the Romney campaign really never responded. And so the results of that were, on election day, another election or exit poll, Mitt Romney's approval rating was 47%. His disapproval rating was 50%. I think those attack ads stuck and really never got dislodged. And honestly, shame on the Romney campaign for not trying to counter that. They claim they were out of money through the primaries, and maybe that's true. I don't know, but boy, that's pretty elementary. You just don't allow that to happen to yourself, but they did. Another thing that isn't much appreciated about the Obama campaign that they were so good at, they've been good at it for quite a while, but they are highly skilled technologically. They were terrific on what is called data mining, and then using those facts. They know 20 or 30 facts about voters that they think are persuadable. And based on those facts, they're able to send out the message over and over again to persuade them not only to really fear and hate the other side, but get out to vote because of that. And of course, the whole goal is to identify your people, persuade them through the right kind of appeal, whether it's personal or everything else, and then, of course, get them out to get them all out to vote. And they did that, and I think we're going to find out later that this sort of work had been going on since 2008. They really were working really. It was really the first true permanent campaign that we've ever seen, where all the targeted people everywhere were constantly, quote unquote, being persuaded by some sort of communication, etc. It was all very much below the surface. But we'll find out in the next few years that there was a lot of that going on, a lot to be learned by the Republicans from something like that. Anyway, the whole effect was that it maxed out their turnout, got their vote out, and obviously they won. Now, what about the Romney campaign? Well, my comments aren't going to be quite as admiring with respect to the Romney campaign. First of all, this was a winnable election, I thought. The voters in poll after poll felt that after 3.5 years or so that Barack Obama really wasn't quite up to the job and wasn't performing all that well, and it's probably okay to replace him. The problem is the Romney campaign, in my opinion, and I'm generalizing a little bit here, really didn't do a very good job of making the case. In general, he sort of ran on his biography, and that's okay to some extent. People like to know about you. It's fine to tout your credentials. But I remember another guy from Massachusetts that did that a long time ago named Michael Dukakis. He didn't do so well either. He ran as a problem-solving technocrat. Sound familiar? That's kind of what we got from the Romney campaign. A lot of platitudes, very little in specific policies, except in one area, energy. He did a good job on energy. You knew what his policies were on energy. Other than that, I didn't see much. About halfway through the campaign, I started nicknaming him Cautious Mitt, and I thought that hurt him too. Except for the first debate, I thought he was extremely cautious, and if you want to take out an incumbent, I wouldn't recommend that. I don't care how weak you think that incumbent is, and of course they underestimated that he was all that weak anyway. Another thing for Romney, my personal opinion, he just seemed to have a little trouble relating to the average person. One guy made a joke that he seems like a nice enough guy, but he kind of reminds you of the loan officer that's turning down your loan. You know, he just didn't quite make it with the average person. And another thing, I think presidential campaigns need to inspire people. They need to lay out their agenda. They need to know why this could be a great term in a great country, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't get too much of that, so he just had trouble persuading voters that he had their interest at heart. Some specifics, like I said, he never really responded to those attack ads, and I think that was just almost fatal. There was the 47% recording where he basically, sure, you're not going to get that much of the 47% that he was talking about that don't pay income taxes, but I wouldn't talk like that about him. I wouldn't talk down to him and say, you know, that it's hopeless. I think you appeal to everybody for their vote rather than talking down to him. I thought he got about 10 days of bad publicity out of that one right in September. Never went out, and he had plenty of opportunities, and I kept waiting for him to do it, but he also never said anything negative about George W. Bush, and I'm sorry if some of you are Bush loyalists, but it would have helped him if he'd have done a little separation there. He also really alienated the Hispanics, particularly in the primaries where he wanted to get to the right of Governor Perry in Texas, and I can assure you the Romney campaign didn't let him forget it. He didn't really want to bankrupt Detroit, but he did want him to go through an orderly proceeding rather than what happened, and of course that was misconstrued. And of course he said nothing about Obamacare, which to me was the big driver of the results in 2010, and I guess I see part of why he couldn't. After all, let's be honest, Obamacare was largely modeled after Romneycare in Massachusetts, and so he was put in a real difficult position with respect to that, and ended up having real difficulty even talking about it. But still, anyway, and he ultimately failed. When you run a campaign like that, you ultimately fail to excite your own base. He really failed with respect to working class whites. I don't have the data yet, it hadn't come in, but I know that with respect to the white vote, it didn't, we don't have the numbers yet, at least that I've seen, but the turnout was not there, and it might have been fatal. One other thing, when you don't inspire people to the conservative vision, listen to this. 2008, 500,000 people voted for the Libertarian. You know how many it was this year? 1.2 million. Wouldn't have made a difference in the election, but it's telling in the sense that these people felt there was a better place to go than Mitt Romney. So that's 3 reasons right there that I've talked about. Another one, it sounds absurd on its face, but it really was important. Hurricane Sandy. You always worry about the October surprise that somebody, usually the incumbent, springs on you. Well, needless to say, the Obama campaign couldn't conjure this one up, and it occurred in November anyway. But what happened was, remember, well, don't remember because you haven't told you yet, 9 to 10% in this election made up their mind right at the last minute. They decided at the very end. contrary to usual, most of them went for Obama. 47% of the people that were polled by exit polls thought that it was the Hurricane Sandy was a big deal, and they were influenced by it. Obama got to look presidential, like he was in charge. One or two almost ludicrous photo ops with Christie giving him the big bear hug. And what's ironic, of course, is big government has largely failed in the aftermath anyway. But he got to look great, and all those people, it was a turning point to some extent for a lot of our late deciders. Plus, whatever momentum Romney had was stopped dead in its tracks by that event. I mean, who heard anything from him the last few days? Next, another factor, in my opinion, underappreciated but tellingly important, our good friends, the mainstream media, and by that I define that as the New York Times, Washington Post, and other papers like them, the three networks, CNN, public radio and TV, the folks we all help pay for. That's who I'm talking about. Everybody knows that they have a strong liberal bias, and it's a strange sort of thing. I could spend a lot of time on this, but obviously don't have it. Let's just say it's interesting to note when polled by Gallup, 60% of the population either has little or no trust in the mainstream media. What those 60% don't know is that they're still influenced by it. If we had time, I could give you some examples. So for years, the media has been a total lapdog with respect to Obama, and more of an attack dog with respect to any challenger like Mitt Romney, for example. And haven't you always had a feeling, by the way the media treats conservatives, that they kind of think there's a Klansman inside waiting to get out, or with respect to some people that they came straight from the bar scene in the Star Wars movie? I mean, you can just see it sometimes the way they operate. Anyway, one of the good books that I was able to latch onto and read lately, fascinating book really. It's by a guy named Tim Grossclose, who is a close friend and associate of Jeff Milo at the university, by the way. Left Turn: How Liberal Media Bias Distorts the American Mind. You don't have to read the book. I'm going to tell you the conclusion. A lot of good scholarship. He cites numerous other sources of people that have done this, etc. You know what his conclusion is? It's a fascinating book as he details it all and gives you sound conclusions. I tried. I read it skeptically, thinking you can't really measure this. But at the end, I was a believer. I think he got it right. Anyway, here's the conclusion. The media probably gives the Democrats 8 to 10% of the vote every election. Now you think about that in some of the close races we've seen. Let that sink in for a minute. My point is, I think the media has a lot to do with who wins these elections. If you don't believe me, buy the book or borrow it from me. That's the scholarship I read, and it looks sound to me. We know it's something. It's got to be something. He says it's 8 or 10%, which is scandalous. I'm a First Amendment absolutist. I'm not trying to control anybody. I didn't like McCain-Feingold, but there's something corrupt and scandalous about that, and it really infuriates me, to be totally honest about it. American people deserve better. Conservatives deserve better. Anyway, that's another big reason. Next, might as well say it, professional malpractice. I'm talking about the Washington establishment, a lot of consultants, the people at the Republican Senate Campaign Committee, and on and on and on. Their failures are going to cut through the rest of my comments, because I think they were large, manifest, and completely obvious. They were just, frankly, rather clueless compared to the well-run Obama campaign, other campaigns, and it kind of reminds me of that old statement about they were like generals who are fighting the last war rather than the war you're actually in. You know, things have moved on, and I just don't think a lot of the establishment types get it. Another one. This is a serious one that kind of goes under the radar. I'm going to call it the brand name problem. Like I said, very serious. Let me read you a quote here, if I'm smart enough to find it. Here we go. You'll love this one. This is from a lady named Heather Higgins of the Independent Women's Voice. I suppose that's a conservative operation. A majority of the American people believe that the one good point about Republicans is they won't raise taxes. However, they also believe Republicans caused the economic mess in the first place and might do it again, cannot be trusted to care about cutting spending in a way that is remotely concerned about who it hurts, and are retrograde to the point of caricature on everything else. Well, how'd you like to have that said about you? But you get my point there. The Republicans have lost the popular vote in 5 of the last 6 presidential elections, going back to the early 90s. The only exception was 2004. I don't think it's just because of bad candidates, although we've had some that were fairly cringeworthy, let's face it. It's got to be deeper. It's got to be deeper than that. The more exit polls sort of shed a little bit of light on that. I mean, one of the worst things you can have is a bad brand name problem. Exit polls. This is about Romney, but it's still a bit of a hint about the party. Romney cares about problems of people like me, you know, the personalization thing. They said that those people voted for Obama 81% and Romney 18%. People don't think he, and by extension the party, care about people like me. Romney's policies generally favor the rich. 53% said yes. Needless to say, they voted for Obama, 87%, Romney got 10% of that vote. Another little hint that there's a big brand name problem out there is Romney actually ran ahead of a lot of Senate candidates, all of who lost, of course. I'll get to that wipeout in a little bit. He actually ran ahead of a lot of reasonably credible people. For example, Connie Mack in Florida, George Allen in Virginia, Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin, Denny Rayburg, Montana, Rick Berg in South Dakota. They can't all have been just terrible candidates. I think they were suffering from the same brand name problem that I've just been talking about, and that is really bad. And I'm not talking about Todd Aiken or that Richard Mourdock over in Indiana. They're a special case, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Point is, it's disturbing to think that the Conservative Party, the alleged Conservative Party, the Republican Party has a big brand name problem. I think those are kind of hard to fix. So anyway, a lot of people say that the brand today stands for Republicans are for big business, country club, no friend of the middle class, or safety nets, and maybe a bit too intolerant on social issues. Do you want to try to win an election if that's your brand? I don't think so. Some other issues that I think contributed to the defeat of Romney by Barack Obama, Todd Aiken and Richard Mourdock. Their, shall we say, to be charitable, peculiar ideas about reproductive biology gave the mainstream media a wonderful chance to scare voters for about a week or two that all these Republicans are just like them. I mean, those guys hurt the national ticket and, frankly, a lot of people in the state. I don't think our primary system helped out much either. When you have serial debates and serial primaries, first of all, it takes a lot of money. Second, it's impossible to do all that and consistently look great. You're going to say something you wish you hadn't said and shouldn't have said. That's human nature. And also, it makes it, frankly, less likely that a top-tier candidate really wants to get in there and do it. And I don't think we had much in the way of a top-tier candidate, as I think back on it. Another one. It's called the Curley effect. There was a Boston politician named Curley whose method was to basically devastate an area, that means people become dependent, then they all vote for you because you take care of them. That's a growing, there really is writing on that. He was so cynical, that was his actual policy. Unfortunately, it works. I think Ben Bernanke helped the chairman of the Federal Reserve helped the Obama campaign too. I mean, after all, if you keep interest rates real low and you flood the country with money and dollars, you're less likely to have a recession now, and it may actually buoy up the economy a little more than it actually would otherwise be. And finally, I think Barack Obama is a little bit like Ronald Reagan. You just don't get a candidate like that very often who really has such appeal over such a huge swath of the electorate. It probably didn't hurt with the minority vote either that he's black. You know, let's be totally honest. You want truth out of me. So anyway, I don't think you get a candidate like that very often. Fortunately, on their side, he just has great vote getting appeal. Now he's so divisive, he just infuriates roughly half the electorate, but he got himself elected. Okay, you know, the really sad thing as you go through all this is, I'll get back to it, Romney still got 60 million votes, 48%. This thing was winnable. Wasn't done right. U.S. Senate races, House races. House real quick. Some votes are still being counted. I think the Republicans lost about 5 or 6. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you all can correct me on that. The big news was the Senate races, where, once again, the professional malpractice was just stunning, in my opinion. I look at the Republican Party as having primarily 3 wings. I'm overgeneralizing, but, you know, there's the more establishment wing. There's the religious conservatives and our new friends, the Tea Party constitutional type folks. Unfortunately, they don't seem to like or trust each other very much. And that really was destructive in this last cycle. So my little advice down the road to voters is, those in the Republican primary system, a very wise man, William F. Buckley, you remember him, the National Review, etc., early leading conservative who wanted to say no and stop to the welfare state, said you should always vote for the person, the most conservative person who can actually win. Fairly elementary idea. That rule was totally forgotten in this last cycle. So that was a problem in the Senate races. Like I said, I think the consultants from the establishment wing were largely out of touch. I'm not sure some of them have been out of Washington for 20 or 30 years, because they sure were doing things that didn't make much sense to me. To show you how dysfunctional the Republican Party has been the last few years, in 2010, there were 3 Senate seats that were just up for grabs to be taken: Delaware, Nevada, and Colorado. The Republican electorate nominated 3 people who, my favorite was Christine O'Donnell out of Delaware. You remember her, don't you? She actually had to have an ad set out that she wasn't a witch. Remember that? So 3 seats just thrown away. So this year, because of the people nominated, we got Todd Akin and we got Richard Mourdock over in Indiana. I submit that voter malpractice and fecklessness has cost us 5 seats at least. I guess what I'm saying is, you want me to tell the truth? I'm telling the truth. Those 5 seats could and should have been won, and now we're down. What's amazing is, this cycle, the Democrats had 23 Senate seats at risk in play. The Republicans had 10. Do I need to go any further about this topic when I tell you that the Republicans actually lost 2 overall, went from 47 to 45? So the Missouri race, I guess, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here, of this incompetence. As I said earlier, even the Dems and Claire McCaskill knew she was a dead woman walking. She was the easiest pickup of all. During the summertime before that primary, her favorables were something around 40%. I mean, that's you're breathing on fumes then. Anyway, but Here's what happened, though. You know about the primary and how Todd Akin emerged. And by the way, this isn't personal. I'm sure he's a good person. So if you're a big fan of his, I'm sorry. I'm coming across like I hate the guy. I don't. I just think he was a terrible candidate. Anyway, years ago, I don't think Kit Bond would have let that happen. A lot of people have said that you could have seen this one coming, and Kit would have gotten him into a room and said, I'm locking the door until we get one-on-one against Todd Akin. Nobody's getting out of here. And I'm an old man, but I'll beat you up, or something like that. I don't know that we would have had this foolishness that we ended up in this primary in this state. We had the Club for Growth that was in favor of Sarah Steelman. The Washington establishment liked John Bruner. Religious conservatives, of course, all went for Todd Akin. Well, when you divide them up equally or so, Todd Akin gets 35% of the vote or thereabouts, and he wins. And within 2 to 3 weeks, he's flapping his gums to make himself impossible to elect and saying things that are just bad. This kind of stuff was replicated elsewhere, particularly Wisconsin. Tommy Thompson was a former 2-term governor, a reform governor, a good quality candidate, but various big organizations backed his 2 primary opponents and beat up on him to the point that he ran out of money and had been labeled all kinds of bad things, so he never could recover. So we end up with a far left Democrat out of Madison or wherever she's from. Anyway, you see my point. And by the way, if Todd Akin hadn't been the Senate candidate, I suspect that Clinton Zweifel, the treasurer, would have lost. I'm pretty darn sure that Jacob Kander, who just won Secretary of State by a smidgen over Shane Scholler, I don't think he would have won either. Scholler would be Secretary of State elect. And that's a pretty important office. Like the rest of you, I'm getting kind of tired of these ballot summaries that are so politicized, and it would have been nice to have straightened that out. Anyway, I just think the way the Senate choices and candidate have been operating, and the way the campaigns have been run has just been a textbook case that somebody better learn from. Okay, governors, state senates and house, and the state of Missouri. Different news here, not glum like I've been to. Sour Bob's going to change here for a while. The Republicans actually added 1 governor in North Carolina. They now are the governors in 30 out of our 50 great states. Pretty good. In addition, something odd, it seems that when you get to the states and below the national radar, red states got redder, blue states got bluer. And it would appear, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the Republicans seem to really be in control in the Midwest, the West, and the South, particularly dominant in the South, particularly since Arkansas totally fell finally. The Clinton machine finally fell apart there. The Democrats are dominant in the North, the Northeast, and of course our good friends on the West Coast there. We're going to see a real experiment because you have the red states controlled pretty much by Republicans, and the blue states by the Dems. California will be an interesting case since they got enough they passed that humongous income tax increase, and they have a veto-proof Democratic House and Senate, so they can pass more taxes if they want. And they even have a cap and trade bill that's moving right along, thank you very much. Somehow they think they're going to be a successful state with those kind of policies. Compare that against the red states that I was talking about. Interestingly enough, this whole legislative thing occurred, all those swing states that were so important and Romney lost almost all of them, Republicans dominate the congressional seats, every single one of them. Some of them are big margins, some of them not so big. If you want the numbers, I could tell you. Well, here they are. Colorado 4-3, Florida 17-9, Michigan of all states 9-5, North Carolina 9-3, Ohio 12-4, Pennsylvania 13-5, Virginia 8-3, Wisconsin 5-3. Now, some of that was because of clever gerrymandering a couple of years ago after the big blowout of 2010. But some of it is just the real deal. They're doing well in that area. In our state of Missouri, we ended up with both the veto-proof Missouri Senate and House. We already had the Senate that way. They actually lost a couple of seats, but in the House they picked up enough to, you need 110, they actually have 111. I have to tell you, I don't think that House is truly veto-proof. The signals are that there aren't enough stalwart people to really get that 109 votes, for, maybe if they really need it. By the way, in Missouri, I also think in this county, Caleb Rowden needs to send a nice Christmas card to two people. One is Kurt Schaefer, by his humongous win. I think he helped push Caleb over the finish line. And to be fair, he ought to give a nice Christmas card to Governor Nixon too, who hoarded his party's cash like crazy and wouldn't spend it on people that could have won. They're all looking forward to it next time he asks for some help, by the way, those that survived. But Caleb won by 51-49, and I think he was helped a little bit. How am I doing? All right. Some thoughts going forward for conservatives. I presume that's mostly us. A lot of people are saying, I think the Republican Party has a lot of problems to sort out, as you can tell from my earlier remarks. Some people are saying, oh my God, we've lost our country. Others are saying it's an Atlas Shrugged moment. I'm disappearing. I'm going to Indonesia or something like that. I don't think it's quite that bad. I think things can be a lot better. Here's some reasons for optimism. Exit polls, again, people call them conservatives, 35%. Liberal, 25%. Here's a great one. Is government doing too many things best left to the private sector? In 2008, the numbers were yes, it is, 43%, no, 51%. This year, believe it or not, yes, 59%, no, 35%. 4 years of this kind of government will do that to you, if you got any sense at all. Do you have a favorable opinion of socialism? Yes, 24%. They're running everything right now, by the way. Do you have a favorable opinion of capitalism? 68%. Do you want Obamacare repealed? Yes, 49%. No, 44%. What that tells me is we have a heck of a message problem and a heck of a problem getting the right candidates to talk right in front of the electorate. Okay. I think that establishment Republicans, Scott Rasmussen, the really good pollster, he wrote a column not long ago where he said that the establishment, both Republican and Democrat, they have a tendency to believe in Washington and its wisdom instead of the people. And his thought was, they're probably done picking our nominees. They've tried to do it. Think about this one. Ronald Reagan was the most successful Republican in the last 30 years, easily. No question about it. You want to know what? He was an insurgent. The establishment didn't much care for him. They didn't like that guy. For whatever reason, couldn't control him probably. Anyway, but he clearly believed in the American people over the Washington establishment types. And so the establishment kind of gave us the Bushes, Bob Dole, John McCain, Mitt Romney. Enough said. I think people are going to be very skeptical about accepting this or that great candidate because the Washington establishment gets their money in and says do that. Margaret Thatcher, in other words, there should be a healthy distrust of establishment wisdom. Margaret Thatcher always said that conservatives have to be, and she called it, conviction politicians. And Ronald Reagan was that. He could talk about what he believed in and make people believe in it and want to do it. I hope that, here's some questions. Are the three wings of the Republican Party, broadly stated, and primary voters, are they going to learn anything from being in the wilderness for a while? Are they going to learn how to work together? Are they actually going to think hard about William F. Buckley's idea about actually nominating electable candidates rather than your favorite person? I sure hope so. Another thing, data mining. I really do believe that the Republican Party and conservatives need to get a lot smarter and learn from this with respect to data mining, persuasion techniques, get out the vote, etc. Learn from the Obama campaign, learn from this disaster. We have something that's sort of cheering me is we really have a pretty good bench. I don't think that Marco Rubio is ready to run for president this year, but he will be in 2016. We also have a great crop of young, reformist, performing governors. Bobby Jindal, Nikki Haley, Susana Martinez, Scott Walker up in Wisconsin. We got Bob McDonald, Paul Ryan, he's a viable candidate. Point is, these people are all in their 40s, as I recall. It's a great bench. Who do the Democrats have? Not Nancy Pelosi. Hillary. We'll see if Hillary runs or can sell. Another thing that I think ought to be done, I think it's time for candidates to be more aggressive with the media, honestly. I don't think that Newt Gingrich was really qualified to be president, but I have to say, I thought people reacted well when he would take on the media in the debates or on Sunday talk shows. You know, if David Gregory tries to call him a racist because he says that Obama's the food stamp president, I loved it when he fought right back and said, "How dare you talk to me like that," etc. You know, I'm just tired of Republicans being craven and cringing and afraid of the media. I mean, can it really get much worse? You're already down 8 or 10%. I just wish they'd show some spine and get rid of the vertebrae made out of Jell-O and start being a little tougher. You got to choose your fights. You got to be careful, as they all say. You got to be careful about getting in a fight with a guy that buys its egg by the barrel. But still, they've got to do better. Demographics, what I started with, got to do better in that regard. The youth vote is a great example. I'm talking about kids 18 to 29. Guess what? Polls of these people invariably show they're basically libertarians. They're very achievement oriented. They're very entrepreneurial. I'm so impressed with so many of them. They should be naturals for the GOP if we did the right message. Now think about this during the last election, but even beyond. I know of no time when any candidate, but particularly Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, made a flip chart presentation to these youngsters and said, your situation is deteriorating because of these policies. Your earnings are in trouble, your jobs are a problem, you're living with your folks at home, et cetera, et cetera. You get to pay off all the debt these people have been running up. You get bagged with that. And by the way, your freedom's disappearing by this law and this regulation, et cetera. I think that's a winning argument, but it was never made. By the way, one reason I love Paul Ryan, he actually wanted to do that. He asked to be able to go to one campus after another and talk that way so some of those people could be persuaded. The Cautious Mitt campaign said no. I think he made one speech at the very end, which was lost in the ether of the universe, so it didn't matter. But that was never done. And by the way, with respect to the young people, gotta have to learn to deal with these issues of gay rights and the religious right. You can't be killed on that issue. And by the way, same-sex marriage passed in 3 or 4 states this year. People are starting to vote for that. And 2 or 3 states passed recreational marijuana laws. So it looks like the ground is shifting a little bit, and the party's going to have to be real careful about how they deal with that issue. Hispanics, another lost opportunity. First of all, the first rule is real easy. Quit acting like you don't like them, particularly with respect to immigration and amnesty. You know there's going to have to be some sort of amnesty with respect to those 10 or 11 million. We can't send all those folks home. And it turns out a lot of Hispanics, culturally, they're kind of conservative. They're entrepreneurial. My point is, some, like the youth vote, some are persuadable. It would be just nice to try and to be intelligent. So with respect to Hispanics, I would hope that the party, starts campaigning there with the message that they believe in. Register the voters, knock on doors. Don't cede that vote, just like with the youth vote. Don't cede that vote. You can get some of that, and you better. Blacks, just once. And this is not original to me. It's from Thomas Sowell, the great economist and political philosopher out at the Hoover Institution. He said over and over again, just once I'd like to see a Republican go to a black area and point to all the destruction in front of the crowd and say, you know, this is what the Democrat leadership has done for you. Would you like to listen to my message about hope, growth, opportunity, making something out of yourself rather than this devastation like in Detroit? You never hear that. You might actually get some of them to vote for you. Yes, I know we all hear about entitlement societies and dependency. I think you might get some people to vote for you. A few closing thoughts. Barack Obama in October of 2008 said, and I'm paraphrasing, "We will soon be able to fundamentally transform the USA." Something like that. Well, you know what? He was really talking about total income redistribution. That's my thought, and I think he's succeeded pretty well. I think he's doing a pretty good job. The Democratic message is equality of results, at least the leftists that are running things now. Ours is equality of opportunity, which, when you think about it, in a lot of ways is a harder sell. But it's got to be made. And that's what I think we ought to do. Like I said earlier, things aren't all that bleak. Romney got 60 million votes, 48%. Ain't nothing. That's a lot of votes. So there's some opportunities out there. Where should we go? Some people should say we should go left and moderate a little bit. I say, no thanks. I don't really think we need two Democratic parties. You know, the far left one and the more moderate one. I'm just not into that. I think we should be better at communicating conservative values, liberty, our principles, be conviction politicians, so that we can actually talk about what works, has worked, always will work, and inspire people to our vision. Ronald Reagan could do it. I think we need to get back to that sort of stuff. To the establishment, to the voters, to the campaigns, to the Republican Party, your old method is gone. It's wrong. It's no longer about turning out the vote. It's now about expanding the base, like I just talked about, and then turning out the vote. Because you don't have enough of a base right now, plus as long with the other problems. So I just hope that party members and consultants and people that really run these things are listening, because it's important. Finally, you know, this country bequeathed to us by our founding fathers. Now think about it. It's been the greatest engine of freedom and liberty and prosperity the world has ever known. You know what I think? I think that country's worth fighting for. And I hope that all of our voters, our conservatives, our libertarians, our consultants, etc., get the message and do what they need to do to respond to this recent disaster and do some things that will actually work so that this country is all that it can be in this 21st century. Thanks very much, and I'll happily answer questions.